Oh, so much for that then. Well, that's a pretty heavy door to slam in your face now, isn't it? And what does this say about Aston Martin? Horner being rejected by Haas wasn't exactly shocking, but being snubbed by Papa Stroll's Aston Martin, now that's a head-turner. What that no represents is shocking. That is pretty seismic because we're talking about a guy who not only set up Red Bull Racing in the first place, but oversaw it being established as a team, and it's soon to be becoming a legacy team in itself. It's just another 10 years before you can call it as such. And right here, with Aston Martin, where we all thought he was gonna go, it seemed like a no-brainer. They just said to him, thanks, but no thanks. And that is an indicator that no matter how much money Christian Horner comes with in his little suitcase, that there are more facets to his overall presentation that teams might be concerned about, such as the element of fear, the culture that might be underneath him, as well as the whole reputation management sort of thing. But yeah, out of all of the teams up and down the grid that may have given Christian Horner a new home, if it wasn't going to be Alpine next to his buddy Flavy Boy, it was probably going to be Aston Martin. That made the most sense, since that team was just hiring anybody under the sun and had the cash to back it up. Because they have been on a mega bucks recruitment drive the last couple of years, as well as getting personnel who are at the top of their game, all on the quest to boost their legitimacy. The team have not been afraid to shove their financial weight around to get what they want, like how Lance Stroll likes to shove his weight around, and this was caught in 4K on Aston Martin's own socials. Yep, he's been at it again, arguably even worse than what he did in Qatar 2023, because the guy, the cameraman that he shoved out of the way, wasn't even touching him. Seriously, Lance, is saying excuse me a little bit too hard for you? Is Fernando Alonso overtaking you in the points a little bit of a bugbear right now, and you're taking it out on other people? No, but seriously, at this point, Stroll should be fitted with a proximity sensor and a reverse alarm, but that's for another video. The comment that made me pause was from Andy Cowell, Aston Martin CEO and team principal, and the former head of Mercedes High Power Performance. That's the blokes that made their Mercedes engines go fast, isn't it? Not only does he comment on the report about Horner's proposals, but he also decided to rub some salt into the wound to show how desperate Christian seems to be. It would be understandable that Andy would be this sore about it, because essentially it could mean that Christian Horner would be taking his job as CEO and team principal if this were to go through. But as we now know, it isn't. So here are Andy's comments for your consideration. Ahem. The topic came up to me in the media session yesterday. I spoke to Lawrence this morning to see what he knows, and apparently, Christian has called almost every team owner at this point, so you can pass the question on to them. I can unequivocally state that there are absolutely no plans for Christian to be involved in any operational or investment capacity in the future. Seriously, it always makes me double take when somebody uses my name. And also what we're hearing right now, a lot of, is just flat out rejections, that Christian Horner, everywhere he wants to go, no team is wanting to have a look in, no matter how much money he comes with. And that is especially surprising, since now the UK tribunal hearing that was set for January is not taking place, the matter being settled out of court. That ending the saga that has been shadowing Christian for nearly 2 years at this point. Christian is now essentially free to roam about the country of Formula 1, but nobody's letting him in, clearly, and it seems like, based on sources reporting this news, it's mostly down to the ex-Red Bull lead going all in immediately. Because Japan site Autosport Web's reporting that Horner and his consortium came in with Aston Martin and maybe others with a figure to the tune of $100 million, collated through investors and sponsors, as well as maybe his own money. The catch? He wanted a stake in the team and the role of CEO, a place which Andy Cowell himself occupies. Papa Stroll being the executive chairman, overseeing the entire widget. So even though Papa Stroll can say that he does own the Aston Martin Formula 1 team, when it comes to the day-to-day task, he has delegated those duties to other personnel who are more skilled in those respective avenues than Papa Stroll may be. He trusts in the people that he has established in the particular power structure, which now Adrian Newey has been developing over the last 6 months or so, as well as developing the 2026 car. And the article did bring up Adrian Newey and suggested that maybe there might have been an avenue for Christian Horner, since there have been sightings and mentionings that Adrian Newey and Christian have actually rebonded after all of the stuff that happened at Red Bull last year, because it was suggested they actually went to a reunion Oasis concert together, that they were able to actually socialise with each other as friends, and that might mean they could actually work together once more. Well, it seems like maybe that was a bridge too far. That doesn't seem to be enough for Adrian to be convinced in actually making these conversations go any further. And you got to remember here that even though Andy Cowell is the team principal and the CEO, Adrian is the managing technical director who not only has the control as to who he can fire and hire at that team, but also he himself has a stake in the Formula One team. But back to the Cowell line. It's really, really blunt for the paddock, enough to make you go, oh, okay then. There's not really much room to speculate. And then you just go, you twiddle your thumbs a little bit, and then in a typical British fashion, you go, well, right then. It's a categorical no from Andy with backing from the boss himself. And that is really telling in the world of Formula One. There is no avenue for Christian to come back at this, and I don't think him throwing more money into the pit is going to make Aston Martin change their minds. Because even though some teams may deny the news, Briatore, there might be something to it, but as of now at Alpine, it's just not possible at this time, as Renault and Alpine, they're restructuring what they're doing at that team. There is no room for Christian as they're trying to transition. No, at Aston Martin, there is no hintings or allusions, or maybe we might change our minds in the future, but as of now, it's not really in our mind. No, it was a straight up, nah, no way. Nope, Christian is not going to be involved operationally and financially. And on top of that, Cowell's tone and his words suggested that right now, Horner's just going around to every single team with a CV and hoping that someone there with a pulse will actually listen to him. And it might be an indication to Christian that maybe the era of the rockstar team principal might be coming to an end or already has ended. As you've seen with recent appointments, F1 teams are really looking for technically minded engineers to try and steer the team back by just simply fixing the car instead of fixing the driver lineup. And we all complained about Red Bull doing that, but now with Laura Mekies, they have very much grounded themselves, and that has been music to Max Verstappen's ears. And it might mean he might stay out the entire course of that 2028 contract he has with the team. Horner's brand of charismatic control and being the pantomime villain, that might be just a relic of what is now the past. But why would Aston Martin say no firmly to someone with Horner's record? Because that does stand. Well, you got to start with governance and timing. Yeah, Aston Martin is, like other teams, been on a recruitment drive. The only difference has been the length and funds they've been willing to extend to get who and what they want. Make no bones about it, Newey's arrival was a very major coup. And the reliable reporting that we've been able to amass over the last few weeks is that Horner was looking for something similar to what Adrian was afforded at Aston Martin. And then the logic would dictate, well, if they were prepared to give that to Adrian, then why wouldn't they give that to Christian? But that unfortunately fell on deaf ears, and that maybe there was just no more room in Aston's already packed leadership. I mean, I have speculated that the people they've already got might lead to too many cooks spoiling the broth. But it seems like Aston Martin has recognised this, and that maybe in terms of cooks, they have enough, and they are very much keeping a lid on that particular broth. They are cooking something good, they're liking what they're seeing, they don't need to add any more chefs to that particular charade. Because adding Horner with an element of leadership and maybe veto power to match what Newey has, that's only going to cause a lot more confusion and delay. And this is the beginning and the eve of a rules reset. And yes, Christian is not allowed to join another Formula One team until the summer of next year. So if he were to go to a team, he could be around to help the team regroup if they did get the regulations wrong. But right now, it seems like maybe the legacy that preceded Horner and not the records seems to be getting in the way. That's why Aston Martin clapped back with that no thank you. And the fact that Cowell was taken aback by the advances does suggest an element of pushback from the higher-ups and talented leads already there. They probably get on well as a team right now, and based on what they've seen or heard, they just don't think Christian's worth the disruption. And Cowell's quote also flatly shuts the door on both routes at once, a stakeholder and becoming the CEO. And if Stroll wanted only the capital without the person, then Cowell could have floated the idea that he could come in as part of the sponsorship consortium, or maybe as a passive stakeholder. But at the same time, even though there was an element of shade that Cowell was hurling at Horner, it also implies that maybe Aston Martin did hear out Christian Horner. They didn't just flatly go, "Ooh, get away! Don't make me use a spanner on you!" I'm guessing they looked at the particulars. $100 million? That is a very big chunk of change right there. Any team would be glad to see $100 million. I think the real bottlenecks here were down to the fit and control of Christian. This seems to be a systematic issue that many other teams have in mind. As mentioned with Cadillac and Haas, there simply is no room within that structure for a force like Horner to slot right in. It would cause disruption. And at the beginning of 2026 or into 2027, you don't need that if you're kind of happy with what you've already got. And you've really got to remember the culture and optics. I've said this in many videos I've talked about on the matter of Christian Horner. Even though he has been cleared twice by various Red Bull investigations, and the matter has now been settled out of court, so it's a done deal at this point, that legacy will continue for quite some time. Because it was protracted over 18 months at this point, and it led, due to the political drama going on behind the scenes, to Red Bull going into a decline from the highs of 2023. That is really, really crazy. That at the end of 2023, teams would be paying Christian $100 million to come and join them. Now it's the other way around, and the teams are just going like, nah, doors closed, doors closed. But even then, with Horner being innocent, he is still too hot of a potato to handle. And I'm not saying here that Christian can't bring any value to Aston or any other team whatsoever. I mean, come on, the championships that he has accrued with Red Bull, you cannot deny those. And as I said in my Haas-Horner video, which actually proved to be true, that Horner had spoken to Ayo Komatsu and Gene Haas, the fact is that he would have learnt many, many hard knocks the last 18 months about how to operate a Formula One team. He will have been educated very, very obviously, very plainly. Because, well, he had to deal with so many blows. But still, the risk-reward calculation, nah, Aston Martin just thought it wasn't worth it. And it's really, really intriguing that Aston actually turned him down, because on the surface, being there with Newey and Honda there, it would seem that Christian would be headed toward a soft landing, because it would be mostly familiar elements within the Red Bull wheelhouse not that long ago. But the catch with that train of thought, given this new information from Cowell, is that maybe, away from the public eye, the team's most likely drawn out its organisation chart around the piece that they have, with Newey in charge. That is part of his remit handed down by Papa Stroll, the power to hire and fire, a major carrot in those particular negotiations. But remember, Papa Stroll owns the show. Maybe the prospects of next year's car is looking good. That's what we've heard from Fernando. That's what we've heard from Adrian Newey. Oh yeah, in terms of great forces with that team, Fernando Alonso is there. You cannot discount him, because even when he retires, he is going to be a long-term ambassador. He will be very much walking up and down the factory, basically pointing things out with an Aston Martin cap on his head. And also, you've got to read the fact that Cowell was taken aback by this news being mentioned within the paddock, that he heard about this that the day before he made that statement that I shared with you. It was enough to maybe destabilize him and go like, what the hell? Is my job at risk? He'd have to call the boss, and I'm pretty sure many other high-profile Aston Martin employees is going, hey, Papa, is this true? And then every single time, Papa Stroll has to go, no, it's not true. And I think after a certain point, Stroll will basically say, all right, enough of this. You have my blessing to tell everyone that Christian ain't going on my team. And if it caused that much disruption, just the very notion of Christian being there, just imagine what it would be like if he actually were there, wearing the green of Aston Martin and having actual authority, not that dissimilar to Adrian Newey. And also, you then got to think about it. If Horner were to work under Newey, would he actually toe the line? The shoe on the other foot and whatnot. And even though the initial reaction I had with this news was a, huh? When I actually stopped to look at it and think about it a little more, it does make logical sense why Aston Martin turned him down. And that maybe this team is actually looking really legit. That they aren't just power hungry and money hungry and throwing cash at problems like the Toyota of old, thinking that cash was enough. Well, no. It seems like the structure they've got is pretty sound, and they don't want to change it up anymore. With Enrico Cardilli arriving from Ferrari, for real this time, after the Italian courts basically said no, now I feel like they just don't want to add people for the sake of adding people. Now, I've talked about Aston Martin, but we've got to talk about Honda in all of this, because I really do feel like the max factor for the last few years, last 6 to be specific, has actually made Honda a little bit feisty, a little bit more confident than they were when they came back into Formula One after suffering the slings and arrows of their second era with McLaren. One thing is certain, that even though 2021 saw the power unit manufacturer have a major wobble, again, before hastily coming back in again, allowing Red Bull to use their IP, They're now brimming with confidence and have a desire for major input within the team. I mean, we've heard their CEO Koji Watanabe saying that in their time with Aston Martin, they would like to have a little bit more input, maybe have their own voice at the table, a seat at the table, as to driver negotiations should the time come and Fernando Alonso step down, or if Lance Stroll decides to call it a day. That's why during the time of the Japanese Grand Prix, Max and Honda were doing all of those PR events together, Max thanking his time with Honda and hoping to work with them in the not-too-distant future. There were many rumours that perhaps Honda would push for Max Verstappen to join the team. Then that was quashed by Adrian Newey saying that given the facilities they have, which are improving, the simulator and the simulations, the computer systems, aren't quite there yet. It's going to take another couple of years before they can try and tempt elite drivers and multiple world champions. But nevertheless, you'd be thinking, well, Honda, Newey, if Horner came in, they would sort of know how to work together, they could hit the ground running. Well, I do feel like that is a power triangle that was established at Red Bull that I think two of the parties do not want to re-establish. And even though Honda publicly thanked Horner after his Red Bull exit, which suggests cordial relations are at play here, at least on the surface level, strategically though, Red Bull and Honda, despite working together in some sort of capacity the last few years, are now headed on different paths. Because even though they have worked under the same roof, Honda was busy doing its own thing, preparing with their new partners Honda. Red Bull was preparing their own powertrains division and the Ford era. The Honda engineers were not privy to the future of what was going on with Red Bull, and the Ford element was not aware of what Honda was doing. Because even though the Honda badge is on the Red Bull car, the last few years it's been mainly under the guise of HRC. Only recently, during the domination era, has just the simple word Honda been back on the car. And I think that split, which then triggered the engine freeze of 2022, so that means Red Bull wouldn't be caught on the deep end since they owned the Honda IP to make those power units, but then they couldn't develop them because the powertrains factory wasn't ready yet. It would then complicate any potential of Horner joining up with Honda at another team. It could, in theory, pose two hurdles. There's confidentiality over Red Bull powertrains and Honda's determination to have real influence this time with their new partners. They might not be content to simply supply engines and fade into the background, and that is the influence you get by partnering up with Max Verstappen. It gives you a little bit of guts. So adding a third heavyweight like Christian with equity would only raise the probability of deadlock or an element of friction. And as we know, when it comes to friction and engines, a bit too much of that could easily cause the element to seize up or maybe, at worst, blow up. And if you want to try and understand why Honda may be getting out the foam of doubt here, you've really got to look at the last big moment when they worked with a big personality and it blew up in their face. Although I do think the Max Verstappen era with them has healed many, many wounds and given them their confidence back. But go back a decade, they were on life support. They were fighting for their lives. Alonso calling their engine in the back of that McLaren a GP2 engine on live radio at Suzuka, the circuit that they own? Sure, Fernando has been forgiven since, and Honda doesn't mind working with the Spaniard now in 2026, but at that time, it humiliated the entire company within their own domestic market. In Japan, that would be the highest of insults. So ever since, Honda has been really careful in maintaining their public image and making sure it's done in the right way. Although in recent times, they have been able to sort of walk back things a little bit in terms of driver management. That's why Yuki Tsunoda's destiny is free to his own devices. They do not manage drivers like the way they used to. And maybe the element of control and input they will have with Aston Martin could be something that Honda will grow to love, and they might have a long-term commitment. They may not decide to run away at the first sign of trouble again. So maybe Honda would be pushing back at the idea of Christian Horner in their own way, because it would feel like your ex-business partner is coming in to help get your new startup off the ground. It just doesn't make any sense. It'd be too close to potential trauma that may have happened in their time together. Too much deja vu. We are starting to see some elements of resistance that Tsunoda was afforded whilst under Horner's watch, and how long it took for him to be actually promoted. I don't know what Honda privately thinks about Horner's handling of him, Yuki, and the company did publicly say it would not interfere in Yuki's future while it wrapped up its time with Red Bull. But it does sense that historically, Honda preferred to be very careful when it came to steering driving calls. Maybe that's why Yuki didn't get called up earlier than he actually was. But now I think it's water under the bridge, and in regards to Tsunoda, Honda, they pretty much washed their hands of him, and they might have a little bit of input with Aston Martin and Yuki, maybe as a reserve driver, but I think really that ship has sailed. Yuki's now got his own management team. They can do what they need to do for their guy. But nevertheless, I think Honda will remember all the lessons they learned whilst working at Red Bull. They will want to have more of a voice as to who partners up with Alonso in the future, or Stroll, or maybe if it's a completely brand new lineup. And maybe Honda, in their own way, might frame it to the Aston Martin bods that they like the system they've already got that's been developing this car and this power unit, and maybe to say, well, sorry, we're all full. You know, there's no room for you, Christian. Oh, sorry about that, but there's not really much we can do because we've got everything sorted out. So it is quite safe to say there is just simply no room at the inn for Christian at Aston. But the real question is now, with Aston saying no, where is he going to go? Well, there has been another little bit of a twist here, and it is coming from the likes of Williams. According to Planet F1, James Vowles was asked about whether indeed Horner had been talking to his own squad, and he flatly said that he had not. Simple, is what James said. But it's what he said next which was intriguing. Unlike Cowell, who rejected any sort of cooperation or discussion with the former team principal and CEO, Vowles, though, is a little more open to discussion. That there is no point closing the door, and you should always welcome a conversation. That, I think, is an open invitation to at least have a little chat, having coffee or something in an informal location, or maybe getting around the table and seeing what Horner has to offer. But I don't think this is an invitation to come in and immediately invest, because, yes, James can maybe offer the invitation, but Horner also has to make sure that they don't step on the toes of Williams investors Dorilton Capital, who are very happy with the returns that they may be receiving from this team. I think it's safe to say for Dorilton, Williams is the jewel in their crown. And you also got to look at that article because in the same breath, Vowles said that they are happy with the structure they've got right now, they don't see any need to change it. But unlike Cowell, he has opened up a little bit of wiggle room, maybe in the future, if the prospects look good for Williams. And who's to say that maybe if Williams continue to be a force and they can really go toe-to-toe with Mercedes, Vowles might decide to maybe branch out away from Mercedes come the end of their contract in 2030, or maybe before that. And that in of itself, Horner to Williams, isn't that crazy because Horner has dealt with Williams before James, in helping secure Alex Albon's place back on the grid with that Williams loan deal. James has now made it very clear he is willing to receive a phone call from Horner in the not-too-distant future. But no guarantees though. But this is something to watch. The Horner saga is not over, even though the favourite team to maybe take him on has decided to basically just go, nah. Because that blunt no from Cowell tells you everything you need to know as to where the story is right now. The team has its power structure in place. It's ready to, ironically, give it a go next year. A Horner deal that likely involved equity and authority would have jeopardized that structure, or at best, just tested it severely. And Honda's view of his methods, including the Tsunoda years, may have added some caution too. But the decisive factors run deeper than cash. It isn't king here, cash. I don't think Aston Martin is judging Christian's talents and saying they're not good enough. No. It's simply just Christian failed the vibe check. But I think you will vibe with this video right here. YouTube and I really think you'll like this, so I'll see you over there.